Join the community that believes no betrayal should go unanswered.
Why are you always saving, Delilah? You're gonna be old before you even live. Amber's voice echoed in my head as I shut the door to my tiny apartment. My best friend had just invited me to a rooftop concert she'd bought tickets for months in advance. I declined. Like always. One day I'll have something that's mine, I told her. She sighed and rolled her eyes. That night I sat on the mattress on the floor, no bed frame yet, sipping lukewarm coffee and staring at the paint-chipped walls. Around me were neatly stacked cardboard boxes filled with everything I'd ever owned: books, files, memories, clothes worn threadbare from use. My apartment was barely 300 square feet. It smelled faintly of dust and the neighbor's burnt toast. But to me it was a castle, or at least the foundation of one. The final piece of the puzzle came unexpectedly. 3 months ago, my grandmother passed away. Her funeral was quiet, barely attended, as if the family had already grieved her long before she passed. But a week after the service, I got a call from her attorney. "She left you something," he said. "It's not much, but she wanted you to have it." I blinked. "She didn't leave anything for my parents?" She said. He paused. "You were the only one in the family who ever turned survival into creation." I didn't cry, not then. I didn't smile either. I just saved. For months, I kept grinding at my accounting job. 55 hours a week in a cubicle with flickering lights and coworkers who thought career meant tolerating misery in khakis. Every paycheck, I moved what I could into a separate account. And when my grandmother's inheritance arrived, not a fortune but enough, I finally did it. I bought a place. Not in the heart of the city, but on the quiet edge of Hawthorne, a modest neighborhood where trees still grew wild and kids played in the streets without phones glued to their hands. The apartment cost $247,000. 2 bedrooms. A creaky balcony. Peeling paint. Faded linoleum in the kitchen. But it had sunlight. And silence. And it was mine. When I first stepped into the empty living room, keys in hand, I didn't see the dust or the spiderwebs. I saw a dream. A decade-long dream that had clawed its way from cold sandwiches and second-hand shoes to real, tangible walls. I rolled up my sleeves, tied my curls back, and got to work. For a week straight, I scrubbed every inch of that place. Peeled off sun-bleached wallpaper from the 80s. Painted every room myself, soft grays, clean whites. I watched tutorials on YouTube about restoring old floors, learned the difference between satin and matte paint, and bruised my knees laying down rugs. And I loved every second. Until the call came. "Hi, sweetheart," my mother said, sugary as ever. "We're having a little dinner this Saturday. Just family. Come home." I paused. I hadn't stepped foot in their house in nearly a year. "What's the occasion?" "Oh, you know," she said breezily. "Just a surprise." My stomach nodded. I could still hear the way she said surprise, the way she always said it right before something was taken from me. "I'll bring dessert," I replied flatly. After hanging up, I stared at the wall I'd just finished painting. My grip on the brush tightened until the bristles bent. I didn't know what was waiting for me at that dinner. But something told me this wasn't just a family gathering. This was a setup. And I'd better come prepared. Saturday arrived too quickly. I stood outside my parents' 2-story home, the one with the faded shutters and lawn they never mowed. The place hadn't changed since I left, but something in the air felt different. Or maybe I did. I adjusted the cake box in my hands, double chocolate, Mom's favorite, and took a breath. Before I could knock, the door flung open. "Delilah!" My younger sister Marissa squealed, practically bouncing in the doorway. Same perfect curls. Same overdone lashes. Same nauseating perfume that lingered like a warning. "You made it," she chirped, eyeing the cake. "Is that from Palermo's?" "Yes." "Oh my God, you remembered." She took the box like I was a delivery girl. Inside, the house was louder than usual. Laughter. Plates clinking. My mom was in the living room, surrounded by cousins I barely recognized. Dad stood at the kitchen island, deep in a loud discussion with Uncle Tom about mortgage rates. I stepped in and it was like a switch flipped, the air shifted, the noise dipped. "Delilah," Mom said, standing. She didn't hug me. Just gave that tight smile she reserved for photos and holidays. "Come in. We've all been waiting." Waiting? I placed the cake on the counter and turned to find Marissa already seated at the table, hand in hand with her boyfriend, Caleb. He wore his usual smug expression, expensive watch, sleeves rolled just enough to show off the tattoo he got to honor struggle. They'd been dating for 2 years. Never held a job longer than 6 months between them. Mom clinked her glass with a spoon. "Everyone," she said, "we have news." I stood there, the only one still in the kitchen, hands resting on the cold marble counter. "Marissa and Caleb are having a baby." Applause. Gasps. Cheers. A few fake tears from Aunt Denise. Marissa looked straight at me. "And we've decided to take the next big step." I didn't flinch. "Marriage?" "No," Mom cut in, her voice like sugar laced with arsenic. "They need a place to stay. A safe space to raise the baby while they get on their feet." My spine stiffened. Caleb cleared his throat. "And well, we heard your new apartment has a second bedroom." There it was. The real reason for this dinner. I looked at my mom. "So you want them to move in with me?" She tilted her head. "Just for a few months. You live alone. It's such a big space for one person." Marissa pressed a hand to her stomach, eyes gleaming. "You've always been the responsible one, Delaware. And we're family." Family. That word again used like a blade. I said nothing for a moment. Let them all watch me. Then no. A stunned silence. Mom blinked. "What?" I said no, I repeated. "My apartment is mine. I didn't work for 10 years just to hand it over because my sister wants to play house without the responsibility." Marissa gasped, tears instantly welling up. "Delilah, how can you say that? I'm carrying a child. And I carried this entire family's expectations since I was 16, I snapped. "I'm done." Dad stood up now, voice hard. "That's enough." "No," I said. "It's finally not enough. You all want to clap for her and cry about babies and sacrifice, but where were you when I was working double shifts to keep my head above water? Where were you when I skipped meals to save for a future no one believed I deserved?" My mother's eyes turned cold. "Delilah, you're being dramatic." "No," I said. "I'm being honest." Then Marissa whispered with venom, "You're heartless." I looked her dead in the eyes. "And you're entitled." I walked out. No one stopped me. No one followed. I drove home in silence, my hands trembling on the wheel. But not from guilt. From rage. I opened my apartment door, locked it behind me, and sat on the bare floor with my back against the freshly painted wall. I had just drawn a line they never expected me to draw. And they had no idea I was just getting started. 2 days after the family ambush, I received an envelope. No return address. Just my name, Delilah Hartman, typed in sharp, bold letters. I opened it slowly, suspecting drama. I underestimated them. Inside was a document, a petition for shared tenancy, filed by my parents, on behalf of Marissa and Caleb. They were requesting legal co-residency in my apartment. I sat down, stared at the paper, then laughed. Loud. A sharp, bitter sound that echoed through my spotless living room. They actually thought I'd fold. Again. Not this time. I called the only person I could trust to not tell me to just be the bigger person. Jordan Blake. Lawyer. Old friend. Relentless. He picked up on the second ring. "Del? I need legal help." Pause. Then talk to me. Within the hour I was in his office, the petition open on his mahogany desk. He read it twice. Then looked up. They're trying to leverage emotional history and familial obligation to establish legal grounds. It's a long shot, but if they get a sympathetic judge. He trailed off. I stared at the floor. They don't get to decide who lives in my home. They didn't earn this. I did. He nodded. Then we fight. We filed a counter motion the next morning, a cease and desist. Proof of ownership. Documentation that the apartment was purchased with my name only on the deed, and all financing handled independently. They had no rights. No standing. But it wasn't just the legal battle that burned. It was the online one. That same night, Marissa posted a photo of her ultrasound. Caption: excited to start a new chapter, just wish everyone in our family felt the same love we do. Broken heart. Over 1,000 likes. Dozens of comments. Sympathy. Outrage. Accusations. She won't even let her pregnant sister live with her? What kind of monster does that? She probably bought the apartment with inheritance anyway. She needs to learn what family means. That last one stung. Because I had learned what family meant. It meant conditions. Control. Convenience. The next morning, someone egged my apartment door. I scrubbed the mess off in silence, fury burning hotter than any embarrassment. Jordan called later. They've gone public. But we've filed. And the judge has issued a temporary injunction. No forced cohabitation. No harassment. Good, I said. But I want more. More? I want to prove that this isn't about family, I said. It's about ownership. Power. They never supported me when I was struggling. They don't get to benefit now that I've survived. Jordan was quiet. Then, you're willing to go all the way? I looked out the window at the city I'd bled to afford. Yes, I said. And I want to make sure they never do this to me, or anyone else ever again. The courthouse smelled like old paper and resignation. I sat beside Jordan, my spine stiff, my fingers numb despite the July heat. On the other side of the polished oak table sat my mother, father, Marissa, and Caleb, the whole guilt brigade. Marissa clutched her baby bump like a trophy. Caleb wore a smug, practiced expression that reeked of entitlement. The judge, a stern woman with silver streaks in her hair, called order. Let's begin, she said. We are here today to address the petition for co-residency filed by the plaintiffs. Jordan stood. Your Honor, my client, Miss Delilah Hartman, is the sole legal and financial owner of the disputed property. The plaintiffs are attempting to override that with emotional appeals masked as familial obligation. This is not a custody hearing. It's a boundary-setting one. The judge raised an eyebrow, intrigued. Then came Mom. She stood, clutched her pearls, literally, and launched into a monologue so Oscar-worthy I almost applauded. Delilah was always distant. Cold. We never asked for anything. But now, with Marissa pregnant and struggling, we thought family would finally mean something to her. Then Marissa, with watery eyes. I just wanted a roof over my baby's head. I thought my sister would care. My jaw clenched so tight, I thought I'd crack a molar. Finally, the judge turned to me. Miss Hartman, would you like to speak? I stood. Everything I have I earned. Every dollar. Every hour of overtime. Every missed birthday, every night spent eating stale noodles in a freezing apartment. No one here helped. Not once. I looked at Marissa. You didn't call when I was nearly evicted twice. Then Mom. You only remembered me when you needed something. Then Dad. You never once said, we're proud of you. Only, why aren't you doing more? I turned to the judge. This isn't about helping family. It's about exploiting someone they thought would never say no. I finally said no. And this is their revenge. Silence. The judge nodded once, sharply. I've heard enough. 30 minutes later, the verdict came. Petition denied. The room went still. Then Marissa sobbed into her hands, loud, ugly, theatrical. My mother looked like she'd bitten into a lemon. Caleb stood, furious. You're tearing this family apart. I rose, calm as ice. No, I said. I just finally stopped letting you tear me apart. Jordan smirked. Let's go. We walked out into the sun. The silence inside my apartment felt sacred now. No courtrooms, no pleading voices, no accusations disguised as concern. Just me, the hum of the fridge, and the low creak of floorboards I could finally call my own, without guilt, without conditions. The next morning I woke up early. Not from anxiety or pressure, just peace. I poured myself coffee, leaned on the windowsill, and watched as the sun climbed over the city skyline. I wasn't angry. I wasn't even sad. I just was. Later that day, I visited the bank. With Jordan's help, we placed a legal block on any future attempts by my parents or Marissa to file claims against my property. The apartment and everything in it was now irrevocably mine. No more loopholes. No more legal tricks. Jordan had asked me after the verdict, "What now?" I didn't know how to answer then. But that evening, as I replaced the last of my second-hand furniture with a brand new sectional I'd picked out myself, deep forest green velvet with gold legs, I finally did. Now I rebuild. Not just walls or flooring, but identity, confidence, self-worth. The apartment became my project. I repainted every wall, switching from that tired beige to soft sage and ivory. I added shelves and filled them with the books I'd collected since college, the ones I never had space to display. I framed photos of me, smiling. Me with friends, me alone at the beach, me alive. And slowly, it started to feel less like a fortress and more like a sanctuary. One day, while hanging up a painting I'd bought from a local artist, a letter slid under my door. No stamp. No envelope. Just a single sheet of paper. You'll regret what you did. One day you'll be old and alone and no one will take care of you. Family is forever. Until you destroy it. There was no signature. But the handwriting was Mom's. I folded the note in half, walked to the kitchen, and calmly lit it on fire over the sink. The flame flared, then died with a faint hiss. I didn't flinch. I didn't talk to anyone for the next 3 days. Not even Jordan. I didn't need legal advice anymore. I needed air, clean, unfiltered, unapologetic. So I took a bus to the coast. A small seaside town I hadn't visited since I was a teenager. The beach was quiet, the kind that smelled like salt and wind and freedom. I kicked off my shoes, walked barefoot across the sand, and screamed into the waves. Not words. Just sound. I screamed for every birthday forgotten, for every backhanded compliment, for every time I stayed silent to keep the peace. When my voice cracked, I sat in the wet sand and laughed. There was no one around to apologize for disturbing. And for the first time I realized I didn't owe anyone an apology either. When I returned home, I had 3 voicemails. Mom weeping. We were just trying to hold the family together. We didn't mean to push you away. No mention of the forged letter. No apology. Natalie, cold and clipped. You'll never be part of this family again. Don't try to come crawling back when life humbles you. As if she understood humility. A real estate agent. Hi, just confirming the lockout notice was delivered and the keys returned. The property is now secure and vacant. Let us know if you'd like to list it. And just like that, the house was mine. Not in theory. Not on paper. In reality. I never answered Mom's call. I blocked Natalie again. But I saved the voicemail from the agent. It was a sound I didn't know I needed. Closure. A week later, Jordan and I met up for coffee. She raised an eyebrow at my relaxed posture. You look different, she said. Lighter. I feel like I've been carrying corpses in my back pocket, I replied. And I finally buried them. Jordan smirked. Then let's build something over the grave. She handed me a folder, documents, listings, ideas. You ever thought about investing in real estate? She asked. I raised an eyebrow. Seriously? You've got capital now. Knowledge. Fire. Why not help women like you find homes too, ones no one can take from them? I didn't answer right away. But that night back in my apartment, I opened my laptop and started drafting a name for something new. A company. A future. A life. Brick by brick, I wasn't just building a home anymore. I was building a legacy. 3 weeks later, the house was listed. It wasn't personal anymore, it was a transaction. Market value. Square footage. Location. A roof for walls and a past that no longer held me hostage. But people remembered. The day the listing went live, my inbox flooded. Not buyers. Not agents. Family. Aunt Marie messaged me. I always knew something was off with the way they treated you. I'm sorry I never spoke up. Uncle Darren. I stayed silent because I didn't want to pick sides. I guess that was still picking theirs. And then a letter. Not an email. Not a text. An envelope hand-addressed, postmarked from the town where my parents had moved in with Natalie. It was from Dad. I watched you grow up too fast. I let your mother make choices I should have questioned. I let Natalie take when she should have learned to earn. I failed you because I was a coward. And now I'm asking nothing. Just wanted you to know. I see it now. I read it twice. Then a third time. And for the first time in years, I didn't cry. I just folded the letter and placed it in a drawer I no longer locked. Because that apology, late as it was, no longer held the power to unravel me. The house sold quickly. Cash offer. A young couple. No haggling. No drama. Jordan handled the paperwork while I watched from a distance, sipping coffee in the apartment I'd built with my own 2 hands. Feels full circle, doesn't it? She said. No, I replied. It feels like a new orbit. 2 weeks after the closing, I took one last walk past the house. Natalie wasn't there. Neither were my parents. The place looked different, bright, painted, hollow in all the right ways. I stood across the street, watching the new owners bring in furniture. A woman was laughing, free, full. A child ran up the porch steps like they were running toward magic. I smiled. Because that house had been a graveyard for me. But now? Now it was someone else's beginning. I was folding laundry one morning when the phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated. For a moment, I thought about letting it go to voicemail. But something made me swipe. Hello? A pause. Then a familiar voice. Aurora, it's Mom. I didn't respond right away. The silence hung heavy, weighted with years of damage and words that could never be taken back. I just wanted to say I saw the listing, she said, voice trembling. You really did it. You sold the house. I stayed silent. I've been thinking, she continued, about everything. About what we said. What I did. The cake that day. I was just so angry? I interrupted. Disappointed? Ashamed? She paused. Jealous, she whispered. You did everything we didn't. You built something from nothing. And instead of being proud, I was afraid. Afraid that maybe you wouldn't need us anymore. I exhaled slowly. You were right. The words hit her like a slap. I could hear her breathe in sharply on the other end. I know I can't undo it, she said, voice cracking. But I'm sorry. For all of it. For a moment, I let myself believe she meant it. Then she added, Natalie's having a hard time. Kyle left. The baby cries all night and she's just falling apart. And just like that, the apology wasn't about me anymore. It never was. I didn't yell. I didn't cry. I simply said, I hope she figures it out. The way I had to. And hung up. That night, I wrote in my journal. Some apologies come not from remorse but from regret. Not because they value you, but because they realize they can't use you anymore. I slept well. For once, their voices weren't echoing in my head. The only voice I heard was my own. It was a quiet Sunday afternoon when the knock came. I wasn't expecting anyone. No deliveries. No calls. No appointments. When I opened the door, I froze. It was Natalie. Her hair was messier than usual, dark circles under her eyes, and the baby carrier hung from her shoulder like a weight she could barely carry. I said nothing. She looked at me for a long second, and then whispered, "I didn't know where else to go." A sharp, instinctual part of me wanted to slam the door. Another part, the one that still remembered the laughter of two little girls playing in the backyard, hesitated. "I just need 5 minutes," she added quickly. "I'm not asking for anything." I stepped aside. Just barely. She entered cautiously, like a stranger. The baby was asleep, his tiny chest rising and falling. Natalie looked around at the apartment, the soft rug, the fresh walls, the warmth I had created, and she almost winced. Maybe because it was real. Maybe because it wasn't hers. "I don't expect you to forgive me," she started, her voice low. "I just wanted to say thank you." "For what?" I asked, arms crossed. "For finally saying no," she said, eyes meeting mine. "You were always the one who held everything together. Even when we didn't deserve it. Especially when we didn't." She placed the baby carrier down gently on the floor. "I thought I was the victim. My whole life, Mom and Dad made me feel like the world owed me comfort. But you? You earned every bit of yours. And I'm sorry I tried to take it." I didn't know what to say. Not because it wasn't what I wanted to hear, but because I had stopped waiting for it a long time ago. "I'm moving in with a friend from college," she continued. "Mom and Dad aren't speaking to me either. I think they blame me now." I let out a short breath. "Not so easy when the spotlight fades, is it?" She smiled, tired. "I used to think you were cold," she said. "But now I get it. You weren't cold. You were surviving." She stood up, picked up the carrier, and headed for the door. Before leaving, she turned back. "I don't expect us to be close again," she said softly. "But I just wanted you to know. I finally see you, Aurora. I really do." She left. The door closed. And I stood there, unmoving, for a long, long time. Not because I was angry, but because part of me, deep buried under all the pain, had waited years to be seen. And now that I had been, I realized I didn't need it anymore. I had already seen myself. Spring arrived quietly, with blossoms lining the trees outside my apartment window and sunlight warming the newly painted walls. The apartment was no longer just a space, it was my sanctuary, a reflection of every scar and every choice that shaped me. But something inside me had shifted after Natalie's visit. Not regret. Not reconciliation. Clarity. For the first time in years, I didn't feel the need to prove myself, not to my parents, not to Natalie, not even to the world. I had already won. The old version of me, the one who bent over backward for crumbs of approval, no longer lived here. I had buried her under 10 years of sacrifice and self-respect. Still, there were days when the silence stung. Days when I missed the idea of family more than the reality of it. On one of those mornings, I received an unexpected email. It was from a woman named Jenna, a podcast producer. She had come across an anonymous blog post Lauren helped me publish, a raw piece about boundaries, inheritance, and the quiet agony of being the responsible child. "I'd love to have you on our show," Jenna wrote, "to talk about financial abuse within families and how you reclaimed your autonomy. People need to hear your story." I reread the message twice. Then, without overthinking, I replied, "Yes." The recording happened 2 weeks later. At first, my voice trembled. But as I recounted the story, the years of silence, the mediation, the final confrontation, something clicked. My voice grew steady. The producer stared at me across the table. "Aurora, what would you say to someone who's afraid to speak up to their family?" I paused. Then answered, "I'd say silence is a cage that looks like love. But real love never asks you to shrink for someone else's comfort." The episode aired. Thousands listened. And my inbox flooded with messages from strangers who saw themselves in me. Women, men, siblings, people who had spent their lives giving until there was nothing left. They thanked me. But what they didn't know was that I was thanking them just as much. Because through their words I realized something. I was never alone. A few months later, Lauren visited again. We drank wine on the balcony, the city lights glowing like embers below. "You're different," she said, smiling. "Not colder. Just rooted." I laughed. "I guess I finally planted myself." She nodded. "And you bloomed." We clinked glasses. And in that moment, surrounded by quiet strength and the warmth of someone who had never asked me to be anything but myself, I finally understood. Home isn't where you come from. It's where you choose to stay.
Team forgiveness or team revenge? Drop your side in the comments. She lost everything and still came out stronger. Remember her name.